Okay, so let's jump right into 2 Samuel chapter 1 today.
Right. It really throws us straight into the deep end, doesn't it? Right after the battle on Mount Gilboa.
Exactly, a huge national disaster for Israel. And the scene opens, what, 2 days later?
Yeah, 2 days after the battle, David's actually just gotten back to Ziklag. He'd been dealing with the Amalekites, had a victory there,
So he might be thinking, okay, a moment's peace, maybe?
probably. But no, not happening. Because on that third day, this man arrives.
And you know instantly it's bad news.
Oh, yeah. The description's vivid. He's come from Saul's camp, clothes torn, dust on his head.
Classic signs of mourning or disaster.
Exactly. Gets to David and just falls on the ground. Shows respect, but his whole appearance is just screaming catastrophe.
David doesn't waste time. First question, where are you from?
And the answer tells you everything. I have escaped from the Israelite camp. Escaped. The camp isn't a safe base anymore. It's something you flee from.
So David presses him, right? What happened? Tell me.
He does. And the news comes like a hammer blow. First, the army fled. Lots of men died. And then the really big news.
Saul and his son Jonathan are dead.
Gone. The king and David's closest friend. Just like that.
Wow. I mean, think about that weight for David. Saul, his king, yes, but also his father-in-law, the man who hunted him.
Relentlessly. For years.
And Jonathan, his best friend, his covenant brother who stuck by him, both gone.
It's huge. And notice David's immediate response. It's not just shock, it's verification.
Yeah, he asks the messenger straight up, how do you know they're dead? He needs specifics.
Right. Can't just take this kind of news at face value.
And the messenger, well, he has a story ready, a very detailed one.
He does. Claims he was right there, Mount Gilboa. Saw Saul himself leaning on his spear, wounded.
Look at the enemy closing in fast, chariots, riders.
That's the picture he paints.
Yeah.
And he says Saul turned, saw him, the messenger, and called out.
And the messenger asks, like, what can I do or something?
Pretty much, here I am, essentially.
Yeah.
And Saul asks who he is. This is key.
Yep.
The messenger says, an Amalekite.
Whoa. Okay, pause there. An Amalekite, that's loaded.
Extremely loaded. Remember the history. God's command to Saul through Samuel was to completely destroy the Amalekites.
The command Saul famously didn't fully obey, which cost him the kingdom, really?
Exactly. So for an Amalekite to be the one present at Saul's death, the king who failed to eliminate his people, it adds layers and layers of irony. And maybe suspicion.
Yeah, you have to wonder. So the Amalekite tells Saul who he is. Then what?
According to him, Saul gives a direct order. Stand over me and kill me.
Seriously, Saul asks him to do it.
That's the claim. Saul says he's in the throes of death, agony, but still alive. Basically a plea for euthanasia, maybe, to avoid capture.
A king asking an enemy, technically, to end his suffering? That's just tragic.
And the messenger says he did it, killed Saul.
And his justification?
He says he knew Saul couldn't survive after being so badly wounded after he'd fallen. So he claims he did what Saul asked.
And he brings proof, or what he claims is proof.
Right. The crown from Saul's head, the armband from his arm, the royal insignia, hands them over to David.
Imagine seeing that. This guy, covered in dust, an Amalekite, holding the symbols of the kingship you are anointed for, but taken from the king you've been fleeing.
It's an incredibly charged moment. And David's reaction and his men's reaction, it's not like, great, he's gone.
No, not at all. It's immediate, deep grief.
The text says they grabbed their clothes and tore them. That standard visceral sign of mourning.
And it wasn't just for show. They mourned and wept and fasted till evening. Proper deep sorrow.
And notice who they mourned for. The text spells it out.
Yeah, Saul and his son Jonathan. Okay, that makes sense. But also for the army of the Lord and the house of Israel.
Right. It's national mourning, the loss of the king, the heir, the army's defeat. It was a blow to the whole nation, God's people. It shows David's heart was still with Israel, despite everything Saul did to him.
It really does. He respected the office, the nation, even if the man holding the office had wronged him badly.
That respect for the position, for the anointed, becomes crucial very quickly.
Because after the mourning, David turns back to the messenger.
Asks him again, where are you from? Like he's zeroing in.
And the guy confirms it again. I am the son of an alien, an Amalekite.
And then comes David's critical question, the one that seals the deal.
Why were you not afraid to lift your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed?
Boom! That phrase again, the Lord's anointed. It's everything.
Even though Saul was David's enemy, David never raised a hand against him because of that status. He had chances, but refused.
Twice, he actively stopped his own men from harming Saul. Because Saul was chosen by God consecrated for that role. To harm him was to disrespect God's choice.
So for this Amalekite to claim he did kill Saul, even supposedly at Saul's request.
It's crossing a sacred line in David's eyes. It doesn't matter if it was a mercy killing or not. You don't touch the Lord's anointed, especially not if you're an Amalekite, an outsider, an enemy.
And David's judgment is immediate.
Yes, startlingly fast. He just calls one of his young men over and says, "Go, strike him down."
And he does. The messenger is killed right there. No trial, no discussion.
It's swift. And David's justification is just as swift, spoken almost over the body.
Your blood be on your own head. Your own mouth testified against you when you said, I killed the Lord's anointed.
He used the messenger's own words, his own boast perhaps, against him. The claim itself was the crime.
It raises a question, though, doesn't it? Was the Amalekite even telling the truth?
That's the million-dollar question. The text sort of hangs there.
Because the other account of Saul's death in 1 Chronicles 10, it says Saul fell on his own sword after his armor-bearer refused.
Exactly. So it's entirely possible this Amalekite just stumbled upon the dying king, maybe saw the crown and armband lying nearby, or took them off the body.
And thought, hey, I can spin this to my advantage.
Right. Maybe David will reward me for bringing news of his enemy's death, especially if I claim I did it. He might have completely fabricated the part about Saul asking him to do it.
Which makes David's reaction even more interesting. If he suspected the guy was lying, or even if he didn't know for sure.
He executed him based on the claim alone. The very act of saying, "I killed the Lord's anointed," whether true or not, was enough. It's a powerful statement about the sanctity of that office.
And maybe a political statement, too. Establishing right away, this is how I view the kingship. You don't mess with it. Sets a tone for his own eventual reign.
Absolutely. It draws a very clear line.
So after this, incredibly dramatic sequence, the news, the grief, the execution, the chapter shifts gears.
Yeah, it moves into David's formal response, his processing of the grief through art, through poetry.
The lament. It says he took up this lament concerning Saul and his son Jonathan.
And importantly, he ordered it to be taught to the people of Judah. This wasn't just private sorrow. It was meant to be a national expression of grief, part of their collective memory.
It was even written down, it says, in the book of Jashar, which sounds like maybe a collection of important songs or poems.
Likely, yeah. A repository of Israel's heroic or significant literature. So this lament was considered important enough to preserve there.
And the lament itself. Wow. It hits hard from the start.
That opening line, repeated later, "Your glory, O Israel, lies slain on your heights. How the mighty have fallen."
How the mighty have fallen. That phrase just echoes, doesn't it? Captures the shock and the scale of the loss.
It really does. Then there's that plea not to let the news reach the Philistine cities, Gath and Ashkelon.
Right. Lest the daughters of the Philistines rejoice, lest the daughters of the uncircumcised triumph. He doesn't want the enemy gloating.
It's so human. And then he curses the place itself, Mount Gilboa. No dew, no rain, no fertile fields, because that's where the shield of Saul, the mighty warrior, was defiled and discarded.
Even in grief, he remembers their strength as warriors. Saul's sword, Jonathan's bow, they were effective, deadly in battle.
He honors that.
Ah.
And he remembers their bond. In life, they were loved and gracious, and in death, they were not parted.
Such powerful imagery, swifter than eagles, stronger than lions, high praise.
And he doesn't just focus on the warrior aspect. He calls on the daughters of Israel to weep for Saul, specifically because Saul provided for them.
Yeah, clothed them in scarlet, gave them gold ornaments, acknowledging Saul's role as king in bringing prosperity, despite their personal history. It's remarkably balanced.
It is. But then the focus shifts, becomes intensely personal when he speaks to Jonathan.
Jonathan lies slain on your heights. And then directly to him.
"I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother. You are very dear to me." You can just feel the raw pain there.
And that famous line, "Your love for me was wonderful, more wonderful than that of women."
Which speaks volumes about the unique depth of their friendship, their loyalty, that bond that defied family politics and sustained David. It was clearly a profound loss for him personally.
Just devastating. And the lament ends by circling back to that main theme.
How the mighty have fallen, the weapons of war have perished. It ties the personal loss back to the national catastrophe. The leaders are gone, the means of defense are lost.
So this one chapter, it's just packed. You get the messenger's dubious story, the immediate execution, the deep national and personal mourning, and this incredibly moving poem.
It tells us so much about David right at this pivotal moment. His passion, his respect for God's order, his political astuteness perhaps, and his capacity for deep abiding love and loyalty.
It really makes you think about, how messy leadership transitions can be, the terrible cost of war, and how differently people navigate grief and power.
Absolutely. That contrast between the swift judgment on their messenger and the deep, prolonged mourning for Saul and Jonathan is striking.
And it leaves us with that lingering question, doesn't it? What does David's decision about the Amalekite executing him, based perhaps only on a claim signal about the kind of king he intends to be, especially regarding the sacredness of the role he's about to step into?
It definitely sets a precedent, a complex start to a complex reign.